Good morning, everybody. And at the outset, I would like to thank the organizers to give me an opportunity to chair this session. And our first speaker who is going to speak on pediatric patients with kidney disease is Arpana Iyengar. She is a professor of pediatric nephrology at St. John's Medical College Hospital at Bangalore. And her achievements are she's chaired the International Society of she's a chair of the International Society of Nephrology Clinical Research Program from 2001 to 2023. She is also an editor of ISN Academy 2021. She's also on an executive committee member of ISN South Asia 2019 to 2023. Also a core committee member of ISN WHO Initiative for End-Stage Kidney Disease 2020. So over to Arpana Iyengar for your talk. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, madam. I'll share my slides. Good afternoon, and thank you very much to the organizing committee of the SRNM for giving pediatric renal nutrition this special space in this conference. And I'm sure all of us are very aware that when it comes to nutrition and children, it is definitely different. Children are quite resilient and they adapt to whatever they are told to. And that applies even to nutrition or diet restrictions or supplementation. So today what I'm going to discuss is based on three important aspects of concepts in renal nutrition with respect to CKD, assessment tools, and management principles. Coming to concepts first, I would like to show a few pictures of children so that one gets an idea how this entity manifests in children, that is malnutrition, which consists of both undernutrition and overnutrition. So you have these kids who are on peritoneal dialysis. The second boy who's 14 years old, can't believe it, isn't it? Only 15 kgs body weight, is so emaciated. And that is the child who succumbed because of undernutrition also playing a very important role apart from his other comorbidities. And you see a 4-year-old who is weighing 30 kgs, and that's the other extreme of malnutrition. So based on the WHO guidelines or definitions, we have undernutrition and overweight as the two ends of the spectrum of malnutrition. Does nutritional status of a child matter in CKD? It's been seen that short stature and poor appetite are associated with low health-related quality of life scores. And this is not only true for the Western cohort of kids, but we have ourselves in our center studied this association of short stature, poor appetite with low health-related quality of life. We all know it is also very as well established in adults that malnutrition is an independent predictor of mortality in CKD. In children, the height is a very important parameter. 14% risk with a decrease in 1 SDS of height is associated with mortality, and the higher risk with height, which is less than -3 standard deviation score. Weight also has a bearing on mortality. The higher mortality is seen with 5% reduction in weight in 3 months. And when it comes to BMI, 6% risk in the death with a decrease in 1 SDS of BMI. Serum albumin has been noted to be associated with increased hospital admissions. So yes, it really matters. So how common is undernutrition in CKD? Now, undernutrition has been defined by various studies in different ways. If you look at only growth failure, which is a very unique parameter to children compared to adults, the proportion or the burden is in the range of 37 to 55%, undernutrition 20 to 60%. And then the third aspect is something that is again very well established in adults, that is protein energy wasting. And very few studies have actually dealt with this entity in children. The CKID study has dealt with this, and the proportion of mild PEW, protein energy wasting, to severe forms would be somewhere between 7 to 20%. And a study from, again, our center has shown that the burden is much higher. I'll come to the details in a bit. We undertook an observational study a few years back looking at the various comorbidities in CKD stage 2 to 4. And you see the cohort that we looked at. Of course, the numbers were 78 versus, if one compares with the CKID study, which is the largest pediatric chronic kidney disease cohort from the West, you see all the comorbidities except obesity. You have higher proportions of vitamin D deficiency, left ventricular hypertrophy, short stature, dyslipidemia in our kids. So definitely we have growth failure, but obesity is very, very less compared to the Western cohorts. As pediatricians, we are very familiar with this term protein energy malnutrition, PEM. And now we are getting more familiar with this entity protein energy wasting. We are still exploring the best definitions that could be used to approach the diagnosis of PEW in children. So the basic difference between PEM and PEW is as follows. In PEM, there is reduced fat. In PEW, usually fat is preserved. PEW is seen classically in chronic diseases, and chronic kidney disease is no exception. But PEM is classically used in situations where there is a nutrition intake deficiency. Muscle is usually preserved in PEM. Muscle is lost in PEW. There is decreased metabolic rate in PEM and increased metabolic rate in PEW. There is usually increased appetite, and therefore we have a good rehabilitation and reversal of the malnutrition in children. But in PEW, there could be decreased appetite, which again precipitates or challenges the recovery from the protein energy wasting state. And there's a good response to supplementation in PEM versus the response to supplementation or intake is not, it could be variable, and that alone would not suffice to manage a child with PEW. This is the proposed criteria for PEW, which was came out in this paper in 2014, wherein you have 5 criteria: the serum chemistry, the anthropometry for body mass, anthropometry for muscle mass, and dietary intake, and finally the poor growth category, which is again unique to children. So 2 categories are unique here to children or different from adult PEW criteria, that is short stature and dietary intake, wherein we are not actually calculating the calories and proteins in this criteria. We are just focusing on appetite. And they have various scores to define whether you are in the mild PEW category or the more severe category. So we undertook a study on protein energy wasting, and in CKD stages 2 to 4, you can see with the number of children of 123, again comparing this with the Western data, the burden is much higher. The severe PEW 64% versus 20% in the Western cohort. Coming to the second part of my talk is assessment tools. We have had a long gap between the previous guidelines and the recent guidelines. The KDOQI 2009 has a dedicated recommendation issue for children with CKD in terms of nutrition. And the Pediatric Renal Nutrition Task Force has proposed the clinical practical guidelines in 2021. So these are the various parameters that as a pediatric nephrologist, one would evaluate a child with CKD for nutritional status. However, we all know that there are various challenges in the assessment itself. A child is in the growing dynamic phase of growth in childhood, and there could be changes in body composition. Edema is a very important confounding factor. Etiology of CKD also matters, because if you have a child who's got an underlying tubular disorder, then they progress slowly and probably the growth gets affected more compared to a child who's got a rapidly progressive GN who gets into ESKD within a few months. There the growth may not be that very affected compared to a chronic tubular disorder. Other medications affecting growth, we use a lot of steroids in both nephrotic syndrome and other glomerular diseases, so that could affect growth. Comorbidities like the bone health and bone mineral balance also matters. And the unfortunate part is that be it adults or children, there is no single tool that is ideal to define or characterize this challenging status of nutrition. So here I'm going to just illustrate that body weight is composed of various compartments. That is fat-free mass, the fat mass. You have the cellular tissue mass, then you have the bone and the other non-active components. And then you have the total body water, which is again divided into intracellular and extracellular water. Then you have the extracellular mass, and then you have something called the body cell mass. So when we are looking at anthropometry measures to define or to characterize nutritional status, we use the mid-arm circumference that is a surrogate of both FFM and FM, and the body mass index is also a surrogate of these compartments, the fat-free mass. Skin fold thickness reflects the fat mass. But we don't have anything else that directly reflects the other compartments you see, which comprises of our complete body weight. So there are limitations in the anthropometry, the biochemical parameters when it comes to assessment in children with CKD. Many of these parameters are underestimated. Some of them are overestimated due to various factors, maybe fluid overload, maybe edema, maybe other causes of short stature and growth failure. So we set out to look at some of these entities in detail in our kids from resource limited region, or you could say developing nation. Is body fat deficient in our kids with CKD? And this was published in the Indian Journal of Nephrology. We had 33 children from stage 2 to 5D. And we saw that the mid-arm circumference was low in 60%. That was a big number. But if you see the low body fat, that is body fat mass index, was low only in 18% by a DEXA scan and 12% by impedance. So there was no difference in the proportion of low body fat between CKD 2 to 5 and the children on dialysis. So though the mid-arm circumference was low, we get to know here that probably our children are preserving their fat mass, or the fat compartment is well preserved compared to the other compartment which makes up for the mid-arm circumference, that is the muscle mass. The next study we undertook, and this is published in the Journal of Renal Nutrition last year, is protein energy wasting common in our kids with CKD? So we had 123 children, CKD 2 to 4, including those on dialysis, and the proportion of them with PEW was 58%. Appetite and anthropometry measures were more useful than the biochemical criteria for diagnosis of PEW. So we came out. I hope you can. So we came out trying to explore this definition that I had just put up a little earlier. And inflammation, though common, was associated with PW only in CKD 2 to 4. So in children with dialysis, though inflammation was very common, it was not associated with malnutrition or undernutrition or wasting. The slides are not moving well. Excuse me for this. Yeah. And the next study we looked at is the Subjective Global Nutrition Assessment, the SGNA, what is usually termed as SGA in adults. So though we know it's a non-specific and semi-quantifiable tool, SGA occupies a very niche segment in the adult dialysis patients. And we wanted to know how it fares in children on dialysis. So we had 40 children on dialysis. We followed them up over a median period of 1 year. And we looked at the profile of malnutrition defined by the SGNA in these children. And this is what we came as to conclusions. 2/3 of children on chronic dialysis were diagnosed malnutrition by SGNA. Majority remained in the same category of nutrient status on follow-up. That's important. Only half of the SGNA parameters were strongly associated with the presence or severity of malnutrition. So again, just like PW, we were able to pick out the most important and relevant parameters that were associated or that would help us make a diagnosis of malnutrition in children. So it's not enough just to extrapolate the definitions and criteria that are already laid out for adults and extrapolate them and then apply them in children. We got to study these same criteria in our group of children and see what role these tools play. There are very many studies on CKID, pediatric nutrition in CKD. Many of them trying to highlight that the high intake of calories, proteins are present when they are evaluated. Despite that, they have malnutrition. The GFR less than 30 is associated with greater risk of poor appetite. In adolescents, lower GFR and obesity is associated with greater screen time, and lower hand grip and strength and frailty are concepts that are coming up even in children. So having said that, the anthropometric measures are just surrogate markers of the fat-free mass compartment. We know that the bioimpedance is a tool that helps us assess the total body water and gives us an estimate of the intracellular and extracellular water. Of course, the DEXA scan is a much more valid tool for fat-free mass. And I would like to highlight the compartment which you see on the left-hand corner, body cell mass, because that is the metabolically active tissue, and I'll come to that in a bit. So what about body impedance, the bioimpedance? Bioimpedance has been used in our center to target the dry weight, and you can see here that we are trying to target the dry weight by having a reference ellipse of the biovector analysis in controls, and then plotting the resistant versus reactants on this graph to see that children achieve their dry weight post-dialysis. And we also have studied this on a longitudinal cohort, wherein we are able to characterize whether these children are in an overhydrated state, dehydrated, low body cell mass, or an increased body cell mass quadrant. So did you know that we all emit gamma rays? This is very interesting. Yes, we all emit gamma rays. And where are these gamma rays coming from? They're coming from the naturally radioactive potassium-40, which is intracellular. And we know that 98% of our potassium is within the cells. And therefore, if we can capture the gamma rays that are emitted by this intracellular potassium, we probably would be able to interpret what our body cell mass is, because this is a metabolically active tissue. And that is the research that I'm presently undertaking. And this is the whole body potassium counter. The child sits in this for about 30 minutes, lies on this for 30 minutes, and there are sodium iodide detectors that detect the gamma rays. There is no radiation side effects here. And then we will be able to capture the potassium content and the body cell mass in kgs. Coming to the last part is management principles. We have clinical practice guidelines for energy, protein, calcium, phosphate in children, and nutrition therapy is now guided by the suggested dietary intake, which is a little different from the recommended daily intake. And we have tables that give us the range of values for this, and we refer to them. Infant feeding is a very important aspect when it comes to pediatric nutrition, and we have very different and specific ways to approach this problem. Gastrostomies are rarely required, but yes, when it is required, it does do a lot of good for children who need to gain weight. And this is the way a practical example of an 18-month-old girl with ESKD on chronic PD who weighed only 6 kgs. The energy required was 447, the protein was 7.8, and fluid was 600 ml. And most of our patients that we in our center cater to cannot afford expensive supplements, and therefore you see we use the F75 and the F100, which is supplied by the WHO, and we use them for diarrhea rehabilitation. We can use that in these situations. So we did that, and we quite achieved good nutrition supplementation. TPN also can be rarely used with Cabiven. And for children on dialysis, we prefer the Reno Pro because it's got no phosphorus and low potassium. And intradialytic parental nutrition is something that we have not really used in, we have not had good experience or in our center, but there are specific indications for intradialytic parental nutrition. This is a study that we undertook to look at hyperphosphatemia, and as you can all guess that children even with CKD 2 to 4 have got hyperphosphatemia. At least 40 to 50% of them had hyperphosphatemia, and we actually derived this pyramid. Most of the phosphate pyramids are based on continental diet, and this is based on Indian diet, and this was formatted and designed and synthesized by us. And the last part in the nutritional supplementation would be to look at the vitamin D deficiency. And this was a multi-center randomized controlled trial that we undertook between 4 centers in India. And we looked at the vitamin D dose, whether it's given as 3,000 international units daily, or 25,000 international units weekly, or 1 lakh monthly for 3 months, to see how in the intensive phase, what proportion of children actually respond to vitamin supplementation. So 75% of our children in CKD 2 to 4 had deficiency, and with supplementation, about 78% responded with normal levels. So there was a 22% children who did not respond to the intensive phase. And finally, there was no difference. We followed the 25 hydroxy levels for 1 year. And finally, there was no difference whether we gave it 3 at a daily dose, weekly dose, or monthly dose. So this was the RCT that we had undertaken. And lastly, Yes. Lastly, the growth hormone, again, is very specific to pediatric renal nutrition, and there are specific indications for this hormone to be given in children with CKD. So to conclude, children need nutrition and nutritional guidance, supplementation, whatever we call it, whether it's precision nutrition. We got to have a greater focus in this path, especially in our region. And I have gone through the concepts, the assessment tools, and the management of pediatric renal nutrition relevant to CKD. And we have got the opportunity to edit this specific series on nutrition and kidney disease from the Frontiers in Pediatrics. And I'm sure this will be a good comprehensive source to highlight the importance of pediatric renal nutrition, especially in the low middle income countries. Thank you very much.